Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm walking home in the sun and the heat and the howling sirens, heading on my way home from work. I thought today I would take a few minutes and talk about some of the films I watched in July, which gets us sort of caught up. I've been doing a retrospective of the films from the previous month, and July had a few, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about them. So let's jump into it. These are in no particular order. So I'm going to start with The Grand Budapest Hotel. It's been a hot minute since I've watched a Wes Anderson film. Of course, he directed things like Rushmore and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou and Bottle Rocket. Rushmore is one of my favorite movies of all time, but I thought The Grand Budapest Hotel was pretty good. If you haven't seen it, it is a story within a story. It is a person, I think he's a reporter, journeys to this famous old hotel, and he meets the owner of the hotel and interviews the owner to learn about the owner's life, and the owner sort of tells the story of how he came to be the owner. And we learn all about the Grand Budapest Hotel when it was sort of in its heyday in the time between World War I and World War II. And when World War II emerges, the film has a kind of stand-in for Nazis who cause all kinds of trouble. It is a film about eccentric characters doing eccentric things in an orderly way, and it fits the oeuvre of Wes Anderson's movies very well. The acting in the film is very stilted, but not... Stilted is a negative word, and that's not how I intend it. Very mannered. It's very specific and performative. It reminds me of something like a pantomime or a melodrama, where the acting is explicitly acting rather than being naturalistic. And that's because the entire film is composed. It looks like a series of drawings, or if someone made an animated version of a graphic novel, that every moment is carefully structured to look the way it looks. It's a hallmark of the Wes Anderson style, and it's beautiful, but cold. I really enjoyed the movie. I had a good time, and if you get a chance to check it out, I would. Now, what would be a game that would fit? I mean, the obvious answer is Grand Austria Hotel. This is a film and a game about the same thing, about really fancy hotels in the era of fancy hotels in Europe. So if you were to play Grand Budapest Hotel, then play a round of Grand Austria Hotel, you'd probably be in pretty good shape. I think Grand Austria Hotel also thematically fits, or mechanically fits, because Grand Austria Hotel is all about careful manipulation of a series of options to allow for incremental improvement and carefully structured advancement. All of that careful architecture that's such a part of the Wes Anderson visual style comes through in the play style of Grand Austria Hotel. Next up, I watched John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. If you haven't seen any of the John Wick films, I'm not sure I can help you much, except to say that they're kung fu movies where the kung fu artists are using guns instead of fists. Although there's plenty of fists and knife fighting too. The John Wick movies are kind of adrenaline thrill rides with a paper-thin plot. By the time we get to John Wick 3, the paper-thin plot has become pretty complicated and frankly a little bit nonsensical. I mean, the first one was sort of silly, but understandable. By the time we get to the third one, it's really nonsensical. You have characters who are, he does a thing for a while with one set of motivations, and then he kind of switches for no apparent reason. And it makes for complicated storytelling, even if it's really entertaining action. You know, if you're somebody who liked the other John Wick movies, I'm sure you'll like this one too. Lots of amusing and entertaining stuff. As I think about what a game that you might play with the John Wick, you want to think about something that's fast and dexterous. So you might do something like Fuse, which is a real-time cooperative game in which you're trying to solve puzzles quickly and roll dice quickly. If you wanted something themed around the plot, I mean, I think there's a game called Vengeance, which I haven't played myself, but I've heard reviewed positively, and I've seen it on the table. And that game is it's basically enacting a vengeance movie. So enacting a John Wick style revenge movie, or, if you're going to go a little older, something like Payback would be an example, or Kick-Ass is an example. These movies where you have a character who's been wronged by a gang of vicious thugs, and they go in and exact revenge for the wronging that they endured. So it seems like that would be a good matchup for John Wick 3 Parabellum. Next up, I did watch a series of movies. I watched Rambo First Blood Part 2, First Blood. I think Rambo 3 is another one I watched. These films involve the character of John Rambo, who is an American Special Forces soldier who spent years in Vietnam in various kinds of guerrilla action. And he comes back to the United States. And the first one's really poignant. In the first one, John Rambo is a soldier who came back from Vietnam and is disaffected, disenchanted with the world, not given any help, in fact, rejected for his service and seen as, possibly crazy. And then he, in fact, does go crazy. It is a anti-war parable tied up, or it's about the way that this country America let down its soldiers who came back from a war that no one really wanted them to be fighting anyway. Surprisingly moving. The second, third, and fourth ones are not nearly as good. They tend to be much more basic in terms of fitting a more traditional military revenge or military Avenger style plot, something you'd expect out of a Punisher novel or Punisher graphic novel, versus emotional depth of the original Rambo film. As to what game you might play that would have a similar resonance, I really don't know. This is complex stuff. Both the story being told in the original Rambo, I guess if you're watching the later ones, like let's say you're really into these films and you're watching all of them that include those sort of more gratuitous rah-rah, go kill people kind of soldiering that you see in the later films. I mean, if you're going to focus on that, then a movie or a game involving miniature warfare, particularly one versus many kinds of miniature warfare, would fit the arc. But ultimately, I don't know that there is a good movie to watch or a good game to play to accompany Rambo or any of the Rambo series. So I might say, don't do that. All right, next up, let's see. I watched a couple horror movies this month. In particular, I watched the Foo Fighters produced film Studio 666. This is a silly Evil Dead 2 style horror movie in which the band founded by Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, sequester themselves inside of a Hollywood mansion and try to record an album. And over the course of trying to record the album, they just are making this one song that's longer and longer and longer. And it turns out there's like an evil demon in the house, and it's possessing Dave Grohl particularly, and resulting in the death of all of the other band members. It's a very silly horror movie. It's not really scary at all. It's much more along the lines of, like I said, Evil Dead 2, a silly, gross out horror movie. Decently made, even if it's, like I said, pretty silly. So if you were going to play a game that fit that narrative arc, it feels like you've got a couple options. To start with, you could play Evil Dead 2 the game. That should carry some of that humor forward. You might also play one of the other slasher movie style horror games, something like, there's one called Last Friday. These are board games that attempt to replicate the slasher movie style of thing. I haven't seen a lot of movies or a lot of games that attempt to do the demonic possession part, particularly with humor. So that's a limited scope if you're going for theme. I mean, as a storytelling game, your best bet is to do something like Fiasco. I think you could make a very, very entertaining play set using the bones of this movie as the setup for a fiasco scenario. You have different members of the band with different motivations coming together to record this album in this haunted mansion. You have one of them gets possessed by a demon, and another one has to try to fight the demon. The others just have their own individual motivations. Seems like you have a lot of potential for successful navigation of that story in something like more role-playing, like Fiasco. So that's what I would do with Studio 666. So next one I want to talk about is The Intern. Now, The Intern is a movie that I watched because I saw a clip of it, I think on YouTube maybe, or on TikTok, and somebody showed a clip, and it was Robert De Niro as a sort of seasoned older worker talking to young professionals in a startup about what's going on in the startup. He brings with him sort of the wisdom of his age, and as such helps these younger workers kind of see what's going on in their lives, or what might happen with their lives. That's kind of the ebb and flow of The Intern. The premise of the movie is that he is a retired executive who he finds a startup company that has a seniors internship program where they're hiring seniors to come and work at this internet startup with the idea that they'll bring with them wisdom. And of course, he is kind of the magical assistant character. If you think about something like the way that Legend of Bagger Vance is structured, or these kinds of movies, he plays that role. This sort of not omnipotent, what's the word I'm looking for? Omnibenevolent guardian who helps out the characters in the film, provides mentorship for all of these characters. Now, in a lot of ways, this feels like boomer wish fulfillment. The idea that having watched that boomers now in firm retirement have this film about one of their generation who shows these young whippersnappers that they still have what it takes, and in fact, none of the young whippersnappers know how to do anything. They just learn from this kind, benevolent boomer. But all of that kind of layering aside, I found it a really charming movie. It was not something I'm gonna watch a bunch of times. It's not something I'm gonna go back and watch again. It's not something I'm gonna buy a copy of. But I did find it pretty amusing. I liked the relationship between Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. I liked the people who played the side characters. These are actors you've definitely seen in other things. And all in all, I found it a really compelling film, even if it was pretty minor in its impact on me. Now, as to what you might do to play a game that accompanies this movie, I have no idea. This isn't the sort of story that often gets told in a game, but I think you could have a game where this sort of thing develops. If you had, it would be a game built around the economics of a workplace, and you could have a variety of different figures that bring in different levels of experience or different levels of competency, and one of the levels that could come in would be age, and then an older figure would be able to bring in experience and maybe could help. Which reminds me, I got the game, Nussfjord. In Nussfjord, you play somebody running a fishing company in this town in Norway, and one of the things that you do is you recruit elders from the town senior center to help you with your company. And they all have experience and leadership that they bring to your company to help your company do better. Whoa, I didn't even realize it, but yes, I had a game that fits the theme of The Intern. I also watched the 1978 horror movie Piranha. It was really dumb, but amusing. We watched The Gray Man, which is a sort of CIA spy thriller. Don't trust anyone in the CIA. We watched The Man from Toronto, which is a buddy hitman comedy with Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson. Not very good, I would not recommend. And we watched Demonic, which is a strange movie about a woman who discovers that her mother was possessed by a demon. Amusing, or interesting, and worth watching, I think. So those are the films that I watched in July. What movies did you watch in July? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and join the conversation there. I'd love to hear what you watched. If you've seen any of these films, do you agree with my assessment? Or can you think of better games to accompany them? You can reach out to me directly, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or send me a direct message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.